talking, that's not very good. Use space words, real ones, not talking about space weed.
Radio Free Innsmouth, episode 420.
오야 진짜.
That's right, those are funny numbers.
Who are you people? What do you want from me?
You want the numbers, Mason. That's all we've ever wanted.
And I am aware of the fact that people have been speculating on what's going to happen on the 420th episode of this program for some time. Because mimetically, the number 420 usually means something along the lines of,
I'm smoking weed!
which is, of course, hilarious. But if you read the number 420 as a date, as in April 20th, it's also the birthday of everybody's favorite funny Austrian painter with the goofy mustache. You know, the
Zig Heil, Zig Heil, Zig Heil!
stuff that all the black metal guys are so into. Now, in the past, I had jokingly stated I was going to attempt to find a far-right stoner doom band to cover for episode 420 in order to kind of speak to both meanings of that number when it comes to goofy numbers on the internet. The closest I can think to that sort of imaginary sound would probably be either Black Magic SS or some of the later, more prog rock, Pink Floyd-y Nocturnal Mortem albums, both of which I have already covered rather extensively on this particular show, so that's a no-go. In the search for the perfect...
Get the fuck away from me, you fucking nick.
sound would appear to be a fruitless endeavor. But then I realized the answer to all my problems had been staring me in the face this whole time with a band I've been listening to a whole lot lately. That being Countess, the originator of the term orthodox black metal. Do not let the Swedes and the French fool you. I covered them way back on like episode 98, I think. But that one was a bit on the short side, and really a band like Countess requires multiple episodes to fully explore all the different twists and turns Orlok's musical genius has taken over the years. This time around, we're going to be talking about the 5th Countess album, The Shining Swords of Hate, one of my personal favorite weirdo black metal releases, and it happens to hit both sides of that 420 equation more effectively than any other album I can think of. More importantly than that, it's just a really weird, strange, unique, and interesting sort of album. It's weird, strange, and unique and interesting, not only in the context of black metal as a whole, but even in the Countess discography. There's nothing really like it. It occupies a strange space in the oeuvre of a project that's already pretty fucking strange. You see, when Countess started out, it was a duo of Vercingetorix on drums and keyboards, and then a guy named Xenon on guitars. When they finally got around to recording their first album in 1993, a man named Orlok joined on vocals and bass, and he had so much faith in the vision of what Countess was supposed to be that even after Vercingetorix and Xenon left the band and pretty much left music entirely, he continued under the Countess name as a solo project with the blessing of the two founding members. If you couldn't tell from the band name, Countess is all about Bathory. Specifically, I believe that Orlok is oriented towards the side of 80s Bathory more so than the super chaotic side of things. Although he does dip into that territory occasionally, he's generally pulling from the more epic, demonstrative, theatrical moments of 80s Bathory to construct his own musical project. To that, he also adds a heavy influence from Venom and Celtic Frost, but also a lot of the epic, heavy, power metal adjacent type stuff like Manowar and Manila Road, and quite a bit of ultra primitive doom metal a la Saint Vitus. When you combine that influence pool with the philosophy behind orthodox black metal, that being the most primitive, raw, and elemental form of black metal imaginable, you get stuff that sounds like this. At least for the first 3 albums. Then you get to the 4th album, The Book of the Heretic, which is tied with The Shining Swords of Hate as far as being my personal favorite Countess album. This one starts off normally enough for Countess, being orthodox black metal in its most primitive form, but as it goes on, you can hear new elements being utilized. notably a much more prominent usage of keyboards, but it's really once we get to the slower sections of the music that we see why this album is different than the other ones that came before it. It all comes down to instrumental separation, resulting in a much more prominent bass guitar tone, and that bass guitar, coupled with the keyboards, actually becomes the lead melodic voice in the music, with the guitars providing more of an almost post-punk Joy Division layer of textured noise, instead of being the primary melodic voice, which is what guitars usually do in black metal. And as you get further into the album, you realize that he's considerably upped the level of theatricality and atmosphere, even compared to the albums that came before it, where that was already a major element to the music. To the point where a lot of these songs become miniature horror short stories with a whole lot of different narrative elements to them, like right here in Warlord's Swan Song. All of the melodic elements are excised except for the keyboards and the vocals in a sort of dark wave, almost dead can dance style, before the metallic elements fade back in for dramatic emphasis. You might be able to accuse earlier Countess albums of just being a Bathory knockoff. I think you'd be wrong there too, and I plan on making an episode about those albums at some point. But when it comes to Book of the Heretic, Orlok is 100% doing his own thing, and nothing else really sounded like it before he did it. After the Book of the Heretic came out, Countess started moving towards Orlok's more modern style, which is a lot more heavy metal influenced. This transition began with the 1997 EP entitled Hell's Rock and Roll, which has a whole lot of Sabbath and even 70s hard rock to it, but it marries that sound to the very theatrical black metal build-up style that Countess had been exploring on Book of the Heretic, where you get these layers of percussion gradually coming in, increasing in intensity, before it all finally explodes with the still very much orthodox black metal style vocals. This is a particularly fun sort of black metal release, and I feel like it comes from the same philosophical position as a lot of later Dark Throne stuff, with the caveat that later Countess is way fucking better than later Dark Throne.
Som klarte seg veldig fint på 70-tallet uten den dritten.
From this inflection point, the heavy metal era of Countess was officially born. And it's here where the Manila Road and Manowar influences, which were always a part of Countess's sound, mind you, become especially apparent. You've got these mid-paced, more marching style drums, thickly percussive heavy metal riffs, and quite a bit of new wave of British heavy metal style harmonization going on in the lead guitar department. But at the same time, it's still recognizable as being orthodox black metal of the oldest school. Actually somewhat comparable to Ari Honkonen's Morning Star project, as far as that goes. And eventually, this heavy metal era of Countess reached its apex with 2016's Fires of Destiny, which had some of the best heavy metal black metal melodic licks of all time. And if you can't get down with that,
You are not my friend. Heaven!
너는 산이야 바다야?
what's all that got to do with the Shining Swords of Hate? Well, I'm glad you asked. You see, part of what makes this album so special is the place it occupies within Countess's overall career arc, because it comes out right in the middle of them moving from the super raw early orthodox black metal stuff into the theatrical Book of Heretic stuff, and then towards the more heavy metal part of their career. We're talking in between the Hell's Rock and Roll EP and before the first of the official heavy metal Countess full lengths. The most experimental period of Countess's career, and this album is the culmination of all of that exploration. When you put this album on, it feels less like listening to a black metal album and more like having a dream about listening to a black metal album than trying to remember what was on the dream album. It's very, very, very cough syrupy, and it definitely hits that first part of the 420 equation. A lot of the songs will just be a meditation on a couple chords on top of which Orlok floats other sort of transitory elements that just come and go, such as these very Viking-era Bathory, but on a whole lot of Benadryl style vocals, which, as you're probably noticing, sound nothing like anything else he's ever done with Countess, and some very dreamlike, ethereal lead guitar. I can attest to this album's defining of the stoner aspect of the 420 equation from personal experience. May or may not have indulged in certain substances while listening to this album last night, and it's definitely hitting the right notes.
I smoke weed.
The second half of the 420 equation makes itself known on the track Total War, which, as you might expect, is about some heckin' Totalen Krieg. And if you listen real close in the background, you can even hear old Joey G making a speech about it underneath all of that ambient guitar fuzz. The dreamlike atmosphere of the first track is still there, but it's definitely taken a turn towards the nightmarish, truly dark, abyssal, hateful shit. Definitely feels like you're being ground down by the gears of war as the drums slowly come in with this funeral march beat that eventually makes a turn towards a more martial aspect as those lead guitars from the first track also come back in, but they're not doing that pleasant melody from earlier in the album. This is just this blinding, hellish, constant stream of slow echoing notes. And the keyboards on this track are phenomenal. There's these very subtle ambient stabs. Feels like it's being beamed into the song from another dimension. In fact, it feels like Orlok is channeling a lot of the same energy as fellow Dutchman Urfaust would later on. Like right here, once the drums are gone, you just got that ambient guitar sludge and these floating ghostly keyboard melodies sort of echoing endlessly through these dark halls. I feel like this album doesn't get enough credit for really doing something new and exciting with the ambient black metal style. It's kind of like, earlier Countess would be like early Bathory, then this album is like when Bathory jumped over to Hammerheart, Twilight of the Gods, but in a much darker and more depraved way. Doesn't really have any of the sunny positivity of that era of Bathory. So that Total War track was 20 minutes long, pretty massive undertaking. The following track, Hate from Hell, is only 3.5 minutes, but it still channels that same weight of darkness in a more concise and aggressive manner. This is also probably the closest this album gets to more normal second wave black metal with the blast beats and the melodic tremolo picked riffs. Kind of almost sounds like the second Moonblood full length at points, although even then it's still far removed from what pretty much every other band has done with this sound. After that initial outburst, the doominess starts to creep back in, and shit gets real heavy and real dark real fast. That wandering lead guitar style is back, this time floating over the top of, honestly, very Saint Vitus style riffage, but way darker than even Vitus went. It's like Walking Dead or Burial at Sea, but even more fucked up and cold. It's black metal and it's doom metal, but it's not really black doom of a style that I've heard any other band tackle, which is why this is tied with Book of the Heretic for being my favorite Countess album. It's unique, it's interesting, it's got its own feeling to it that doesn't sound like quite anybody else. It actually conjures up some of the same emotional feeling as Gates of Slumber's Suffer No Guilt, which is another one of my favorite albums, but in a black metal way instead of a doom metal way. Probably not an album that everyone out there will enjoy, but if you give it a chance, I think you'll find that it's absolutely a later era of classic black metal masterpiece. The track after Hate from Hell, Tvur and Tisvard, or in English, By Fire and Sword, really underscores how dreamlike this album feels, because it brings back the chord progression and certain melodic elements from the first song on the album. And after having gone through the 20-minute monstrosity that was the Total War song, as well as that burst of black metal hatred that was Hate from Hell, it does feel like you're recalling something from a dream or something that happened a whole lifetime ago. It's not a straight up long form redo of that first track. It's more like a reincarnation of the ideas from that. Real past life remembrance type shit. Like this is that same lead guitar melody that they opened the album with, but it goes off in these new directions. Feels almost kind of improvised, or maybe more like he's channeling the ideas from somewhere else.
And where are you boys from? Somewhere else.
Then we start to wake up from the dream with kind of a crunchier black metal style, although still very spacey and ambient in its affectations. If you really pay attention, you can actually tell they're combining ideas from the first song with ideas from Total War. Especially right here, that's the same opening bar chord meditation that they started Total War out with. but it's got all these different melodic elements from the opening track of the album laid on top of it. When you finish this episode, I would highly recommend listening to this whole album in one sitting. You'll start to notice all kinds of weird little things like that, connections between the different tracks. Definitely enhances the overall dreamlike atmosphere, which will again turn towards Nightmare with the next song, my personal favorite of the album and the one that hits the second part of the 420 meme the most. Totenkopf, Satan's Soldaten. This one's also probably the most Saint Vitus-y of all the songs on here, particularly during this intro, where they marry a slow two-finger trill to sampled sound effects of mid-20th century warfare in a very dark and freezing cold sort of way. Then the doom metal proper comes in, and it's got some of the heaviest, most desiccated and primitive riffs I've ever heard. Almost comparable to drone doom, apart from the fact that there's a pretty healthy drum presence. And eventually, it'll speed up a little bit, but still remain doomy, kind of echoing the crunchier mid-paced part of the track that came before it, but in a much darker, more hateful way. Again, there's an interesting stylistic overlap with bands like Gates of Slumber or even Conan, just totally blackened and slimy sort of shit. Really feels like you're experiencing the horrors of trench warfare, chemical gas attacks, barbed wire, limbs getting blown off, all that kind of shit. And this subtle slowdown we're experiencing right now is just masterfully done, letting those chords from Total War ring out and kind of blend into the droning subtle hints of keyboard, like explosions going off, throwing up a bunch of shrapnel, and then just all this wreckage slowly falling to the ground. Really, really dark, evil sort of sound on this song. But the follow-up takes something of a more hopeful tone. This album's all about the ups and downs in its sonic story. We're talking about When the Raven Flies. Probably the most distinctly pagan sounding of all of the songs on this album, which is fitting given its lyrical content. If the first song on this album was a meditation on 2 chords, this song's a meditation on just 1. Definitely the most mantra-like, the most religious sounding song on the album. You just got this single chord with these clean guitars and keyboards kind of floating over it, and then the distorted guitars come in, and it's just brutally heavy. Not even heavy like heavy metal, heavy as in there's like a weight pushing down on your chest. The lead guitar is back in full force.
This time, I'm going full force.
Providing sort of a Greek chorus commentating on all the din and chaos and sludge going on underneath it. Vocal approach on this track also tends towards the epic doom metal, very elegiac, and the intrusions of cleaner guitar and keyboards that happen occasionally hint back at a development of the sound from the Book of the Heretic album. The whole thing just feels very cohesive and significant in a cosmic sense, solemn and grim. It's got that same sort of Motorhead orgasmatron rhythmic feel to it, but in a much darker and spacier way than obviously Motorhead ever did. Countess is all about taking ideas from the most ancient forms of metal and building on them in a new way that still sounds very fucking ancient. I remember reading an interview with Warlock where he said that one of the biggest compliments he ever got in an interview was about the first Countess album, that it sounded like it came from like the dim and dank swamps of 1983. It just feels older than it is. Like maybe this was an alternative path of metal evolution that died off but still exists in the fossil record. Now, when this album ends, it ends the same way a lot of Countess albums do, with a cover. In this case, Bathory's The Return of Darkness and Evil. And it makes sense that for this most fucked up and depraved sounding Countess album, he would choose to cover a song from the most inaccessible, noisy, and mysterious sounding Bathory album. But even then, as crazy as the original version of this song was, this new Countess take on it is just and it's the perfect way to end this album, given Warlock's unwavering allegiance to the most ancient school of orthodox black metal. Absolutely nails the sort of croaking, decrepit vocal style necessary for the song's chorus. And then there's this weird scream, total banshee shit, which is then followed up with Orlok's uniquely depraved take on the Bathory lead guitar style. Just a perfect way to end this darkest and most mysterious of Countess albums. It might be hard to track down a physical copy. I don't know if this has ever been reissued. Obviously, I went out of my way to buy an original way back when, since it's one of my favorite Countess albums and one of my favorite black metal albums overall, but he's got the whole thing up on the Countess Bandcamp if you dare to explore more of this album's nocturnal secrets. So there you go, Shining Swords of Hate. You want a black metal album that hits both mimetic definitions of 420? I think this is the best you're gonna do. Now, if you excuse me, I got the munchies. I gotta go eat some pizza. Thanks for listening or watching or whatever the fuck you did, and I'll see you next time with some more good shit.
Julian gets an order for twice as much more dope, and he thinks he can just wave some money around, and the magical fairy grandmother of dope's gonna come and give us twice as much dope. That's not gonna happen.